Welcome back to our YouTube channel, and yes, we are going to proceed with our HTML and CSS series. And maybe to give you a quick recap, in our previous tutorial, yes, we looked at HTML basics. We looked at those different tags. We explored a number of them, and I told you in our previous tutorial that it will be important that moving forward, you already familiar with those tags, so that now by the time we start our actual coding, which we are doing today, because today we are going to develop our home page using the real code, like we're going to code HTML and CSS. So I want to take you through those baby steps, step by step, to know how can you be able to design your own website from scratch. Like, how do you design your website from scratch? So without wasting time, of course, let me just navigate to our project. Remember, in our last tutorial, we looked at this project here. This is where we had a number of tags, like the anchor tag, the HR tag, the B tag, the P tag, the form tag, the footer, the nav, and everything. So that's what we covered in our last tutorial. So in today's tutorial, we're going to see how do we then create our home page. And remember, I told you that always the first file to be created in HTML is known as the index.html, and always that index.html is our home page. Therefore, do not go ahead and create another file here called home.html. Just know that our index page is the home page. Now, how do we start? Where do we start? As I told you, where do we code from? We always code from the body section. So I'll just simply start from here. And what we're going to first develop first is known as the nav section. Yeah, what we're going to design is the nav bar or the nav section. And there is a tag called nav. You just simply call your nav. After calling the nav, make sure that you enter, and we write in between here. So in this, we want us to have the image tag and then the other things. For example, the image is going to act as our logo, so I'll call the img tag, and I'll just first of all leave it there. I'll link it later. Then I'll have the a tag. Those are the anchor tags. So I have the anchor tags, one being, let's say, the register. Yes. Then I'll have another anchor tag here. Maybe this anchor tag is going to be called login. So I can just simply copy this and I paste it below. So I can copy this and I paste here, then I paste here, then I paste here. So now look, yeah, when you call your anchor tag, remember we write in between the opening. Remember, this is the opening tag, the one that I'm highlighting, and this is its closing. So whenever we are writing, we write in between the tags, in between those angled brackets, not within inside here. Make sure you follow along. So don't write within here. For now, we are not writing there. We write in between the opening and the closing. So in between there, that's where we write. So here we shall have, let's say this will be contact, and then this will be about, yeah, about, and then let's say this is going to be our home. So someone there might be wondering that, then he would think that, let's say, the home page should come first, then login, then contact, then about. But I have a reason as why I'm leaving them like this, because as we shall be applying our CSS, these ones will be now working normally, yeah. Because right now, yes, we are starting from what should come last, but the CSS will reorder them very well. So for now, just know they are like this, and we can leave. So the moment I save this, look, we have created our nav bar or our nav section, and we have added these different anchor tags or these links. And then for now, we are going to first save, and then we first look at the result. So I Control S, make sure whatever change you make in your website, you save, then go back here, check for your website here, and then double click on it, and then run. To run is to double click, and then you see something like this. So you can wonder, even someone I know at your end, you're wondering, look at this. This is home, this is about, this is contact, login, and yes, I would assume let's say home is going to come first, then about, then contact. But because we are going to apply our CSS, now these ones will align very, very well. So now after that, let's go back to our project. Now, in our nav section, you have seen that we have tried to add our img, but here we don't see any image there. The reason is because we haven't linked that image in the source. This is src, means you're sourcing the image. But when you check our image folder here, this image folder is empty. So we are going to have some resources somewhere. The resources can mean the images, the logos, the everything. So what I did first, I have some resources around here under images, so I'll just simply double click on them, and then these are the images that we are going to use. So you can simply Control A, Control C, like Control A, Control C, you're copying everything, then copy it from there and then take it to your website. Remember, our website is called Apex website, so I'll just simply double click on it and then come to the images folder, which is empty for now, and then I Control V, because I copied all the images from their side and I brought them here. So if I go back to our website inside the VS Code and I try to open this, you can see that we have a number of images here. So now amongst these images, I can use one of them. For example, let me just check on this. This is not the one, this is not the one, this is not the one. So I think it's this one. So because this one is not the image that I want, so I'll simply just use the other one. So anyway, let me first open so that you can see. I want to use this logo.jff. Now this .jff means the image extension. So we have some images which are called that .jpg, then .jff, and so on and so forth. Now from here, what you do, how do we then source these images? You simply call, remember, the images are residing inside a folder known as images. Now, for us to be able to link these images, you must first point at the folder where they are residing. So the folder which is harboring them, or which is storing them, is called the images folder, and then the images folder gives us access to the images that it has. For example, I can choose this one, the logo.jff, and then I Control S to save. When I save and I come back to refresh, you shall have something like this. So we have now the images and then the links, but we need now to organize them. Now this is just simply HTML, and what you should know with HTML, simply it gives you the skeleton. HTML just gives us the skeleton, and then the CSS is the one that adds the beauty to our project. So therefore, since we have now the structure, now what we are going to do next, we want us to create our CSS so that we can be able now to design this. We want to align our links and then the images so that we can have our navbar well designed. Now how do we do so? Now there is a folder called the CSS folder, which is here. So it is within inside that folder where we create our files. So you just click on the CSS, then you hover around here. If you don't want to hover, you can simply right click and there is this option of new file. So you can either use the other hover option, or you can just right click on that in the folder and then click on the new file, and our file is going to be named as style.css. styles. Okay, you can call it style or style.css. So let's just call it style.css. But what you should mind about, whatever we are writing here this side, it is in lowercase. So just know that whatever we write should be in lowercase. Even here, as I'm writing my style.css, it is in lowercase. Now, after writing your style.css, what you need to do first before you can even write anything in your CSS file is to first of all come to your HTML, which is the index.html, and then you link your CSS inside the HTML. Remember, it has to pick CSS from a separate file into this file. It is the HTML file that renders the page, or that displays the data. So therefore, these two, they have to be in communication so that we can have that data well aligned. But where do we link our CSS from? In the previous tutorial, I told you that we have two sections of HTML. We have the head section and the body section. So in the head section, that's where we find the metadata, where we find the meta tags rather, we find there the title, and it's where we link our CSS from. So for us to be able to link our CSS, we shall just simply come here and then we shall enter. So within this, remember, we are working within the head section, and the head has the opening, which is the head, and the closing, which is the head. So within inside that section, that's where we should link our CSS. So we shall add another tag, it is called the link, and then you just to ease your process, when you just type the link, just simply click on tab. For For example, when you come here and type the word link, there is a tab key on your keyboard. There's a tab key. Just click on the tab so that it auto completes for you, and then you can be able now to link your CSS here. But before you link your CSS, you need to first of all ask yourself, where does CSS reside, or where is the CSS file stored? The CSS file is stored inside the folder known as CSS. Therefore, for us to be able to access our CSS, you need to first of all call the CSS, which is now the file. So you call the CSS this folder, and then you point to your file. The file is known as style.css, and always some text editors like VS Code and let's say Sublime, they can always auto suggest for us. For example, when we pointed at the right folder, it is giving us each file which is inside there. So I'll just simply click on that and I save. So therefore, right now I have both my CSS and HTML, they are in communication. So I'm going now to begin on my CSS. But what I can do first, I can first of all test whether it is working. And how do we test? You go to your CSS and there is a tag known as the body. Now there is a tag called the body, and then you can add these curly brackets. Those are called curly braces or curly brackets. Now we call the body and then the curly brackets. Now the reason that's why we are calling the body, what we want to do, we want this entire white section to have a color to see whether HTML and CSS are in communication. It is so important that before you proceed with a lot of things that you're going to code, make sure that you first test. Now here we are in the testing process, and I'll call what we call the background. So I might call my background color and I give it any color. For example, I've just chosen blue violet, and when I come back here and I hit refresh, now you can see that okay, now my website is picking the right CSS. So therefore I can now, instead of having this, because we are not going to have this background which is like this, I was just simply testing, so I'm going to remove this. Yeah, I'm going to remove this. I was just testing to see whether CSS and HTML are in communication. But now since they are in communication, I'll now simply just apply the right code inside. Now always when we go to our CSS file, the first thing we do always is to call our body section, and we add these codes or these attributes. Now what we are writing, they are either called attributes or properties or codes of CSS. So what do we do first? We call our body section the way I code it, and then I apply the curly brackets. Now this curly bracket just demarcates that whatever I write in between these curly brackets belongs to the body. Yeah. Now the body is just the tag that is helping us that in HTML we point at a particular section that we want to code. Now I want to design my body, and I'll simply first of all call the margin, and I'll apply a 0. Then from there I'll simply also call padding. There is another attribute called padding. I'll also add it to 0, and then maybe if I want I can add a font family, but for now we can just go by those ones. So I've added the margin to be 0 and padding to be 0. Now if I come back and I hit refresh, you can see that nothing has changed, but the reason that's why we are adding these two, we do not want our website to have spaces unless we add them by ourselves. Now instead of CSS to automatically pick its whatevers, now for us we have added the margin to be 0 and padding 0. So always for all website we're going to design, they must have this. So this body must always have margin 0 and padding 0. Now the moment we are done with the margin, now we are going to start on the actual coding. So I'll take you back to the HTML, and then I ask ourselves, what have we coded? First we had to call our nav tag. Now this is the nav tag. So the nav tag is representing the nav section. So even in our CSS, if we begin to design, we are going to first call the nav. So I'll call my nav here, and then I add the curly braces. Now the nav is representing the nav bar. Now I'll first of all give it a background color. Yeah, I can call a background color, and then, or either you can call a background or background color. Either of the two can work. So I'll call the background color, and I can give it a color, maybe dark golden road. Now there is that color called dark golden road, and I will save. So when I save this and I come back to refresh, now you see I'll have something like this. Yeah, I'll have something like this. So but you can see that this image is very big, that's why it is causing this, but don't worry, we are going to work on it. Now after adding this background color, I need to give it a height. Yeah, I'll give it a height to occupy. So I'll add a height of 70 pixels. Now in HTML and CSS, how we measure in pixels. yeah, and pixels is represented by px. So when I say 70 px, I'm saying let's add a height of 70 pixels, and then I go back to hit what, refresh. So we shall have something like this. Okay, then we are proceeding, and what are we going to proceed with? Maybe let's first design this logo so that it moves away from our whatever, so that these things can align a little bit properly. So let's begin with the logo before we can go to these links. Now the logo, what we need to go back to and see. Now how do we design the logo? Now for us to be able to design this logo, we shall need to call this img tag. Remember, the img tag is representing where the logo is sitting. But again, for us to be able to design this, we need to first of all call the nav. Why the nav? Remember, the logo is residing inside the nav tag. So for us to have access to this image, we need to first of all point at the nav. So the right path to go to the image, we shall just simply come here and I call the nav and then call the img, then add the curly braces. Now this is how we point at that particular item. Since we wanted to code our image, which is this one, you have to ask yourself, where is it residing? It is residing inside the nav tag. So therefore, for us to be able to call this the image, we need to point at this. Now what do we do first? We are going to first of all minimize its width. So we shall call the width, and we shall say let the width be 50 pixels. Now we are saying width to be 50 pixels. If I go back and I hit refresh, you can see now the width has been reduced. Yeah, I've just simply come and I told it, okay, let's reduce your width to 50 pixels. I can also have its height to be the same, so that it's equal. Also it will be 50 pixels. I'm reducing it so that it can fit in the other height of 70 pixels that we gave the entire nav. Remember, the entire nav was given 70. So it's our image, for it to fit very well in that section, we gave it that 50. Now from there we can add something called border radius. Now there is a concept known as border radius, and you can give it 50%. Now there are times when we add things in percentage, and there are times when we add them in pixels. So for now, the border radius, just take it that it's going to be 50%, and when I come back here and I refresh, you see we have something like this. Before, it was like a box. If I happen to highlight this and I comment it out is twilight and control/, then save. Let me first take you back to where we are. You see, it was just like a square, yeah. But when I added this border radius to be 50%, it makes it a circular, like it makes a circle on it. Okay, so we are done with that. Now after that, what we can do next, we can now maybe add something called a margin. So we can add something called a margin, because what we want to achieve, we do not want this one to be touching these borders. So we can add something called a margin. Yeah, we are going to add something called a margin, and a margin, we are going to measure it like this. Now when you're measuring a margin, remember we have this north, this is the north, this is east, this is south, and this is west. So I'll apply something called, let's say, 10 pixels. Now 10 pixels is representing the north, that from the north you add 10 pixels. Okay, this is what I mean. Now from top, leave 10 pixels, so it gave a space of 10 pixels. This side 10, this side 10, and below 10. So that's what it means when you say margin 10 pixel. Okay, now after that, we are done with at least clearing our logo. Now what we need to align now next, we want to align these items, the links themselves. Now how do we do so? We go back still to HTML, and you ask yourself, for me to have access to these anchor tags, these A tags, I need still also to go inside the nav. So therefore here I'll jump outside. Remember, the moment you're done with your image, jump outside these curly braces and then you write outside them. So we shall call the nav and then the A tag, and then you call like this. So this is how we call the nav. Now after calling the nav, now we shall add now a property called the float. There's something called a float, and we shall say we want to float to right. Now by saying float to right, what we want to do, we want to push these ones to come this side. So the moment I refresh, you can see they are now this side, they are here. And now if you can look closely, they have rearranged. Now the home page, the home is coming first, about, contact, login, and register. So we are done with that. Now from there we shall proceed we can add another property called a margin still, which will be, let's say, 20 pixels. Now we have added a margin 20 pixels, reason being we want these ones to separate and I don't want them to touch this. So if I happen to refresh, we shall have something like this. You can see that our website is taking shape. Yeah, if you can see closely, our website is taking shape. Now after that, you can see that this color does not rhyme well with the dark golden road. This blue color does not rhyme well with the dark golden road. So therefore, we shall now instead change this one and we shall have a color to be white. So we can change our color to be white, and if I happen to refresh, we shall have something like this. Now after that, we shall still proceed with, now remember, I don't want these underlines, these ones, so I want to remove these lines below the links. So what we shall do next, we shall add another property called text decoration. Now there is a property called text decoration and I shall say none. Okay, I want to say I don't want to decorate my text. If I happen to go back and I hit refresh, we shall have something like this. So you can see everything is taking shape. So we are done with our home page. Rather, we are done with our nav section. Now the moment we finish our nav section, we are now going to proceed with now designing the hero section. Now this section, which is coming just immediately after the nav, is called either the hero section or the banner section. So at times we call it the hero section, or we can simply call it the banner what? The banner section. Now I'm going to call my banner section and I'll simply now go back to HTML and I'll jump outside the nav. Make sure you're not coding now in the nav. For the nav, we are done with it. So I want us to proceed with the nav, with the banner section rather. Now for us to be able to design the banner section, we are going to introduce another item known as the div. Now remember, in our last tutorial I showed you some of the links, rather some of the tags that we are going to use, and among those ones we had something called a div. Now this div section is the one where we are going to apply that section of the banner. And now for the div, since we can have many of them, we are going to introduce something called a class. So within the div, in its opening tag, let's introduce something called a class, and this class is going to be called a banner. Now the reason that's why we are introducing a class, it is simply because we want to be able to identify that particular div. If I don't give it a class and I just simply come this side the way we have been calling the nav, it would mean that in case I happen to create another div section, it is going to be adding more CSS to those different divs that we are creating. But the moment we introduce a class, it means that I can easily reference that particular div that I'm talking about in the CSS. So that's what we are trying to mean. So the moment I come here and I save and I happen to go back to CSS and I refresh rather the page, you will not see anything. But I will now simply come to CSS and I code this banner section. So now for me to be able to code the other banner class, I simply need a dot. I said dot banner. Now when you're calling classes, for them we apply a dot. But if it's just a normal tag, for example, if I go back here, the nav was a normal tag, it was not a class. That's why we call it directly by its name. But if you're calling a class, for example, from HTML and you called it class banner, when you come to CSS, it is called dot banner. And now inside the dot banner, we're going to first of all apply the height to it, and we shall say let the height be 400 px, to mean we want to give it its height of 400 pixel. Now the moment you're done with the height, let's give it a background. Now a background, I want to apply an image to it. I want that section to have an image, so I'm calling a background. So when you call a background, you add something called a URL. Yeah. Now when you call a URL, then you're going to say dot this. Okay, so you're going to say dot. You can simply now just either call images. You're going to call images. Okay, let me just do like this. Dot this. Dot this. Okay, so what you do, you just call the URL, then you bracket, then add 2 dots dash, then forward slash, and then it will give you access to the folders. Then you call the images, and then you said this is the banner. So I want us to use the banner, which is this image. So if I happen to go back and I hit refresh, this is what you can see. You see this? Yeah, you see this? So we have this banner section and it is having this image, but you can see this image is repeated. Yeah, it is having this and this. Now that's where we're going now to apply some of the CSS. Yeah, that's where we're going to apply some of the CSS. For example, there is a property called background repeat, this one, and you say no repeat. So you can say background repeat, no repeat. It means that it won't repeat this image. Now from there is another property called background color, yeah, rather background size. Now you're going to say cover, like background size cover, and then this one will cover now the entire what? The entire width of the project. Okay, so we are done with the banner section. So we are done with the home, the nav, and then the banner section. So what we are going to proceed next with is another section which we are going to look at. Now the section we are going to code is, let's say, the about section. So we shall simply come back to the HTML, and then we are done with this div, so we shall jump outside the div, and then we call the about. So we are going to code the about section. So to code the about section, we shall first of all call the h3, and we shall say about let's simply just say about what? Anyway, let me say about the fuck out. Yeah, about the fuck out, and then I save. If I save and I happen to refresh, we have this about the fuck out. Okay, you see that? Now I can also first of all code this, because I want this one to come in the middle. I'll also give this class, I'll give it a class of title, or maybe I can say about title. You see this? I've just said this is about title. So I'll come to my CSS and I'll jump outside this banner and I'll say dot. Remember, it's also class, and I'll say it's about this title. Then I add this. Then I can say text align center. So when I say text align center, I'm simply saying, can we move our text to the center? You can see this. Now it's at the center. We can first leave it at that. Now the moment we are done with that, we go back and then we come here. Now what we want to do, we want to create a section. Yeah, we want to create a section which has two columns. Yeah, we want to have a 2-column display. So I'm going to introduce something called a section. Now there is a tag called section. Yeah, and then within this section, that's where we're going to add this. But before that, let's give it a class. Let's say this class is called about section. Yeah, this class is called about section. Now inside this, I'll now call some of the divs. I'll call 2 divs, this, and then I'll call another one. Yeah, I'll call that div, and then I call another div. So because we want to have a 2-column display, so I want us to call these 2 divs. I have called this div and then this one, and I'll give them the same class. Yeah, I'll give them the same class here. I'll say this is class, and I'll say this is class column, and then also this one I'll give it the same class column. Yeah, I'll give it the same class column. So I've said this is div class column, and this one is also column. Now from here, we shall now enter each, and then we write something there. Yeah, but I'll begin with this div. The first one I'll enter. Remember, I've left this one here because I don't want to confuse. I'm working with the first what? With the first div, and I'll call an image there. Yeah, I'll simply just call an image there because we want to have a 2-column display, and I'll simply call the image and then call this one. Then I save. So this is what we are doing. If I happen to refresh, now this is what we are doing. This is the fuck out image. So I've created that image. I want one side to have an image, then the other side to have what? To have now the content. So after that, I'll also come here and I'll also then add some content within here. So I'll have my H2 here, maybe for heading, and I'll have it as welcome to the faculty. Welcome to faculty of computing. Yeah, welcome to faculty of computing. That's the title, and I'll also have another whatever for paragraph, and I'll say this is the computing faculty of mobs. It's the best. It's the best faculty so far we have at mobs. I'm just writing this just to demo. Now we have now now this is the section, It has two divs, one div to have the image and the other div to have the content. If I happen to refresh, right now everything is just disorganized. So we are now going to apply CSS so that these things can align clearly. Yeah, we're going to apply CSS so that now these things can align clearly. Now, how do we apply CSS? We shall simply now come to the CSS file, and then we shall now code that section. Okay, so we're going to code that section of the about section. Now, for us to be able to code that about section, we shall simply come here and we say, okay, what are we calling first is this. So we shall come outside here and we say dot about, yeah, it's about section. Yeah, then you add the curly braces. Then what do you do first? You first of all give it a width. So we shall give a width of 90 but percent, not pixel. So we give it width. Then what else can we add? We can add a margin to be auto. Yeah, don't worry, for now not everything is going to make sense. First practice. The more you practice, you're going to master these things. Now you might be wondering where we are getting these things from, but just know, let's first code like this, then data master is going to come automatically. Then from there is another property called overflow, and then you can say hidden. Okay, then we save this. If you happen to come and we refresh, so we have something like this. Yeah, it has come to this, but it hasn't yet taken shape. Okay, now after that, the moment you're done with this about section, yeah, this is what we have first created. We first of all designed this about section, which is now the wrapper, the outside layer. Now we want to code the things which are inside, but remember both of them are having the same class called column. So therefore we just simply come outside this and I'll call dot column. Okay, then I add these curly braces. Then I'll say dot column. I'll first of all call the float, and then I'll say let it float to left. Okay, then from float left, I'll call its width to be 50%. Then from that, I'll also add a padding to be what? To be 20 pixels. And then lastly, I will add what we call a box sizing, and I'll say box sizing to be border box. So now these ones are enough for now. So we have added a float to left. Then we have added this. Let me refresh and I explain this side. So we have something like this, but I know where the issue is coming from. Everything is okay, but the image is a little bit big. But let me first also work on the image shortly, so that now the image does not disturb us. Now let me call the image as well. And how do we call the image? First of all, come back. The image is inside here. So therefore, for us to be able to call this image, I'll simply call the column and then the img. So I'll just simply say dot column, then img. Then let me first wrap this image to a width of maybe 50%. 50%. Then I save this. Then I come back here to refresh. So we have something like this, you see, but it is a little bit small. Let's increase on its size, maybe to 80, and then we wrap up like that. So you see now, we have one side has an image, the other side has content. Yeah, one side has an image, the other side has content. So if I want to add more content, I can simply come back here and I add another p tag within here. Yeah, you see, and I add another p tag, and I can use a dummy code called rorem. There is something called rorem. Just write rorem and you click a tab, and then it will add more other information here. Because I wanted it to occupy here, I can simply also add still another rorem here by adding another p tag here, and I say simply just write the word rorem and click on it, then save. Now the reason why we are using this is acting as the placeholder. If I don't want a lot of content, if I don't want to write, I can just use rorem to just show that this is where our website is going to be. Yeah, something like this. Okay, after that, what is left now is the footer, and we shall be done with our home page. Now for us to be able to code the footer, we shall simply come back here to HTML, and then we come outside that section. We call the footer what? The footer section. Now inside the footer section, we can now add the h2, and we say at copyright this at copy and copy. Actually not at copy, it is and copy. And copy this, you say 2026 or right reserved. Then you save. Then when you save this and I come back to refresh, when you scroll down, we have something like this, but we need to align this. So we're going to go and we style this. So how do we do that? We come this side, then you come here and you call the footer. Remember, the footer is not a class, that's why we're not adding a dot. So we're going to first give it a height of 60 pixels, and then we save, then hit refresh. Nothing has changed, no worries. Then you can also add a background, not a background color, just a background, and then you say gray. You can instead use gray, that. Then come back here, hit refresh. We have something like this. So I want to align this in the center and then give it a color. So therefore I can say text align center, then it will move my text to the center, you see. Then I can also reduce maybe this was H2, let's give it H4 because H2 is a little bit big. Then come back here, hit refresh, something like this. Okay, then from here you can change its color. Yeah, come this side, you give it color, sorry, not columns, color, and you say white. Okay, then come here, hit refresh. You see, we have something like that. So you can also come back here and then you add a BR tag just to ensure that it does not touch you see this. Okay, so something like that. So the moment you're done with this, okay, now you can see we don't have a lot of code, but already our home page is already designed. What we had to do first is to create the nav, which we have created. Then we went ahead and created the banner section, then from the banner section to about us section, and let's the footer. So you can see we have our home page fully designed. So from here we shall now proceed with now how do we link these pages, so that now, for example, when I click on this, it goes to about us page, the contact us page, the login page, the register page. So we shall have something like that. So we shall just proceed from there, but today we just wanted us to design the home page. Yes, so keep following, make sure you follow these things step by step. That's how we will learn, and keep practicing. Thank you so much. Let's catch up in the next video.